flu have intensified as the cases and fatalities mount. With IRN USA Radio News, I'm Hope Duggar.
WNRI Woonsocket. Are you or someone you love in need of post-surgical or dementia care services? Woonsocket Health and Rehabilitation Center is our area's only JCAHO accredited provider of skilled nursing care and comprehensive rehabilitative services. To learn more, visit us online at woonsockethealthcenter.com or call us at 765-2100.
Tonight becoming mostly cloudy with a chance of showers and a slight chance of a thunderstorm after midnight with a low in the upper 40s. And on Thursday, it'll become mostly sunny with a high around 63 degrees. I'm Arthur Cataract for WNRI Weather.
For weather conditions anytime, log on to WNRI.com, click on Arthur Cataract's weather, and see firsthand up-to-the-minute local weather conditions.
WNRI Woonsocket.
The views expressed on the following program of those of its hosts and participants in no way reflect those of the staff or management of WNRI.
We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around. Our government has no power except that granted it by the people. It is time to check and reverse the growth of government, which shows signs of having grown beyond the consent of the governed. If the deficit continues to grow, it will not be because the Congress cut taxes too much, but because it refused to cut spending enough. They just can't face discovering that their tax and tax, spend and spend philosophy over all these years didn't work, doesn't work, and won't work. No one that I know in this government has any intention of taking away the checks that these people are getting. I've said it over and over again, but somehow it does not get as much attention as the lies that have been told by those who want to portray us as somehow out to destroy Social Security. It is time to reawaken this industrial giant, to get government back within its means, and to lighten our punitive tax burden. And these will be our first priorities, and on these principles there will be no compromise.
I'm not afraid to take a stand, everybody, come take my hand, we'll walk this road together, through the storm, whatever weather, cold or warm, just letting you know that you're not alone, holler if you feel like you've been down the same road.
Hello. Welcome to Take a Stand. I'm your host, Leanne Senek, and I thank you for joining me on this beautiful spring day, finally a beautiful spring day. Last week we had a great show, thanks to Barbara Ann Fenton, the chair of the Rhody Young Republicans. And if you're interested in the Rhody YRs, Barbara Ann is hosting an event at Nilo at 400 Knight Street in Warwick at 7 p.m. tomorrow evening. Last week, we covered quite a few different topics. This week, we are focused, and we're focused on the Bill of Rights, and specifically the Second Amendment and your right to bear arms. I have two guests here with me in the studio this evening who are just veritable fonts of information. Please welcome Dexter Liu of the East Bay Patriots and Fred Lermer, president of the Cumberland Beagle Club. Dexter and Fred, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Leanne.
I know we've got a lot of ground to cover tonight, and we will have a couple of messages from our sponsors, Wilfred Seafood and the Woonsocket Republican City Committee, coming up. So let's get right into it. Fred, you're president of the Cumberland Beagle Club. Tell us a little bit about your organization and how you got involved with it.
I am currently the president of the Beagle Club. We have about 475 members. I've been a sportsman. I grew up in New Hampshire, basically around guns all my life. Coming to Rhode Island, I wanted to find a safe place to be able to use my firearms. And living in Cumberland, it was a nice local organization. We have about 105 acres on our property. We have several different ranges, rifle ranges, pistol ranges, trap ranges, and it's just a great place to go. I shoot trap every Sunday mornings. We have trap leagues. We have pistol leagues, teams of various sorts. We have trout ponds, and just a nice place to go. It's a nice, very rustic spot to go and be, and it's just most enjoyable. Everybody up there really enjoys it.
Great. Now, Dexter, I know you have a compelling personal story that motivates you. Would you mind sharing that with our listeners?
Absolutely. I'm obviously very passionate about the notion of liberty. I mean, being a member of the East Bay Patriots and just being an American. My folks, I'm actually first generation Chinese American. My folks escaped communist China in 1949. Mom was born and raised in Shanghai. Dad in a hamlet a little outside. He was the youngest of 13. And when 1949 came and Mao Zedong was taking over, what happened was Mom and Dad tried to get their family out. Unfortunately, not all of the family got out. In fact, from my dad's side, only he and my mom were able to get out. First thing that Mao Zedong did when he came into power was he assembled a youth corps, similar to sort of the Hitler Youth. They called it the Red Guards, and they went from house to house, and the very first act was to confiscate all the firearms. And what happened subsequently is certainly in the pages of history. But with my family, what happened was because my mom was very wealthy, my grandfather was the equivalent of the president of the Chamber of Commerce for the city of Shanghai. And Shanghai was quite cosmopolitan in the 30s, so they were targets. And so when the communists came, they confiscated the books, they burned Bibles and so on, and you're only supposed to read the little red book, The Teachings of Chairman Mao. And if you didn't do that properly, and at that point, of course, you're completely defenseless, they would drag you away to retraining camp. And if you didn't go, sometimes they shot you. With my family, they came in and they confiscated the beautiful brownstone home that my folks lived in, or my mother lived in as a child. And within the first 2 decades of Mao Zedong, it's been reported anywhere between 68 or perhaps even as many as 100 million Chinese were murdered by Mao. So that's not something that, especially when you know that in your family history, it's profound. So when my folks moved to America, and obviously I was brought up in America, although I didn't came back here until really 1968 because we kind of lived all over. You really relish American freedom and American liberty. So when people started really attacking our Second Amendment and all of the things that are going on with our own government, I really believe Washington is completely broken. I just had to speak up, and here I am.
Great. So the laws that are currently pending in our General Assembly that they're going to be voting on as early as tomorrow, can you give us a quick summary of what they are and how they will affect gun owners?
Well, there are 9 pieces of legislation, and I know Fred can probably bear some of that out. And actually, the hearing's tomorrow. The Senate hearing is tomorrow. So the goal that we have is to make sure they don't leave committee. And in fact, there are going to be a lot of us testifying against these bills that are being heard. Now, not all of them are bad. I mean, some of them actually have some merit, although I think they do need to be tweaked. But there are at least 4 or 5 really egregiously very bad bills that really, they do need to be killed for a lot of reasons, not the least of which they won't work. And of course, they infringe on our freedoms. But the worst part of it is these really target law-abiding citizens and will do absolutely nothing to solve the crimes that they purportedly want to solve. So that to me is a dereliction of duty. I mean, I'm not going to, tell the people who drafted these. I don't know what's in their hearts, but history tells us many of the things that they're proposing in some of these legislation historically simply haven't worked. And why are we repeating going down the same road again? I mean, for instance, one bill that's going to be heard on the House side, I remember the House number is like H5590, which is essentially the modern-day assault weapons ban, which was passed in New York, Governor Cuomo, and then, of course, more recently, a version of it in Connecticut. Well, our governor wants to do his version here in Rhode Island, just he wants to join that club. Here's the problem. During the Clinton era, a similar legislation was actually enacted in place for a decade. And by the United States Department of Justice own reports, they hire criminologists. In fact, I can cite the study. It's from the University of Pennsylvania, submitted to the United States Department of Justice, a study on whether or not it was effective, and if it was, how effective it was. They measured no perceptible effectiveness of the 10-year ban. So why reenact it again? This is the government's own study. So our legislators, or at least the ones who are proposing these bills, are ignoring history, and they're going down the same road all over again.
Now, do you think that's because, I mean, now, Fred, you're a president of a gun club.
Yes.
Were any people who are in positions like yours, were they consulted when they were
Absolutely
wording
not.
these bills?
No, not at all. In fact, they, I think, for whatever reason, have their own agendas going forward, whether it's the 5573, the Finn bill. She's a freshman rep, and I don't know what her motivation is to put this bill forward, but it sure has put her name out in the forefront. This bill is going to be have a huge impact. Basically, it's a gun registration bill. They want everybody who owns a firearm in the state of Rhode Island to go register this gun, serial number, make, model, so forth, with your local authorities, and pay a tax of $100 per firearm. Some of our club members have been collecting firearms for years and years and years. I can note one off the top of my head, probably has close to 250 firearms. That's going to cost them thousands and thousands of dollars for somebody who lives on Social Security to come in compliance with this bill. That's just the financial part. The registration piece of this bill doesn't, once it's passed, it goes immediately into law. So every firearm owner instantly becomes a felon. You don't have time to go down and register. It's just so badly put together, so badly thought out. And not only that, but gun registration historically does not work. Stalin did it, Hitler did it. And do we think something along those lines can happen in the United States? These days, I'm not so sure.
That's a scary thought.
You know, I think, to Fred's point, I mean, Fred, you and I have talked about this. For me, it has really never been about guns. You know, the notion that they want to do all of this, gun buyback, gun, registration, all these kind of things. We have a system of justice in the United States of America. It's called presumption of innocence. You know, all of the sportsmen of whom there are, I believe, about 120,000, perhaps even more, in the state of Rhode Island. You know, no one's done anything wrong. And yet these laws target us. And it's so egregious. I mean, the bill that Fred just cited, the registration bill, the part that I found even more egregious than just the taxation, of course, that's a forced tax, is the fact that if you don't comply, if you don't pay $100, you can be imprisoned up to 3 years for every violation.
That's each firearm.
That's for each firearm. That's outrageous. I mean, we're talking about a community that has no history of crime, none whatsoever. And in fact, I have to tell you, I mean, I belong to Newport Rifle Club. We have over 700 members. And our neighboring club, Tiverton Rod and Gun Club, 800 some members. We're pillars of our society. These are doctors and lawyers. In fact, the guy that got me to join Newport Rifle Club is a good doctor friend of mine. And he's an enthusiast. He's a sports shooter. His sister's a sports shooter. The sister's a lawyer. Okay, we're craftsmen. We're tradesmen. We're businessmen, businesswomen. We're the pillars of our community. And yet, when these bills pass, should they pass, God forbid, we instantly become vilified and criminalized, and they put the burden upon us that really should be imposed upon criminals. And that's not justice.
No, not at all.
And to take that a little bit further, with the instantaneous implementation of this law, once you become a felon, there go all our firearms. So
you're a felon. You couldn't own a firearm.
If you're a convicted felon.
Exactly. So one has to wonder what the motivation is for such a badly written law. But, we can't read into someone's hearts, but we can only object to what they do, because these legislations are going to be pending. And tomorrow is the Senate hearing. Senate hearing actually happens first. And then the following week, the May 1st, the House hearings.
Now, there's a lot of controversy with gun control now, and we're talking about gun violence. And I know you have an issue with using the words gun violence and gun safety and things like that. What part of that argument is not valid?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, this is how Fred and I met. I personally am very passionate about liberty, first and foremost, okay, even beyond just legal gun ownership. Just the notion that our Bill of Rights is being attacked, really, to me, is a red flag. So that's why I started to speak out. And then as I dug down deeper and deeper on this whole notion of gun control and so-called gun violence, I found out that this entire debate indeed is completely disingenuous. I would even go so far as to say that it's a fraud, and I can prove it to you. Okay, and the way I prove it to you is based upon government's own statistics and own reports and own data, which our politicians completely ignore. Okay, I can walk them through with you if you like.
Okay, well, let's go to our first commercial break. When we come back, we'll definitely go through those. You can prove those points to us, and we can talk about, the different offenses to our liberty. And we'll be back, and we'll be opening up the phone lines when we come back. The numbers to call are 766-1380, 800-949-9674. We'll be back right after this on Take a Stand. Ladies, have you heard that the Woonsocket Republican City Committee is hosting a spring fundraiser?
Yes, it'll be an afternoon tea Saturday, May 11th at 2 p.m., just in time to celebrate Mother's Day in spring.
It's going to be held at Ciro's Tavern, which is at 42 Cherry Street in Woonsocket.
Is it going to be upstairs in the beautiful Hampton Court?
Yes, and what a delightful place to have a tea. As they say, step inside and step back in time.
It sounds like the perfect setting. Do you know what they'll be serving that day?
We're going to have assorted tea sandwiches, potato salad, plenty of scones, fresh fruit, crostini, and of course assorted desserts.
Also, we will be serving assorted teas and fine bone china teacups, so please come and enjoy a pleasurable afternoon.
And we're going to have a craft and activity table for all children under 12. Boys and girls will receive a costume hat and accessories. They'll be able to make a Mother's Day card for their moms, and they'll be able to choose a piece of costume jewelry to go with it.
It sounds like a delightful event. How much is this going to cost?
Well, adults are going to be $25, and it's going to be for children under 12, $15.
That's not bad considering it is all you can eat, and it's going to be held in the beautiful and elegant Hampton Court.
That's right. Mark it on your calendars, May 11th, 2 p.m. See you there. Ta-ta, ladies.
Wait a minute, this sounds awfully girly. What about the men? Are we invited?
Of course. Gentlemen are always welcome for tea.
It's going to be a family affair.
We can't wait to see you there. For tickets, please email takeastand1380@gmail.com or call me at 401-954-3744. We'll be happy to get tickets out to you.
See you, ladies and gentlemen, at Ciro's Tavern, 42 Cherry Street, Woonsocket, on Saturday, May 11th at 2 p.m. Ta-ta!
Wilfred's Seafood at 805 Cumberland Hill Road in Woonsocket is offering weekly specials from April 24th through April 30th. Take advantage of this beautiful weather and enjoy some Maine steamers. $2.99 a pound this week through the 30th. Also, Wild King Salmon. Wild salmon, $10.99 a pound. Medium shrimp is only $5.99 a pound, and Will's famous oven-ready scrod, only $4.99 a pound. You can even take those little foil trays and throw them right on the grill. So when you decide to spark up the grill this afternoon or this weekend, remember, Wild King Salmon is on sale, and it'll be great with some steamers on that side burner. Come in to Wilfred's Seafood at 805 Cumberland Hill Road in Woonsocket. Welcome back to Take a Stand. I'm Leanne Senek, your host, and I'm here with Dexter Liu and Fred Lermer. We are talking about gun rights, and Dexter, just before I went to the break, you said you were going to be able to prove some of the disingenuous arguments that are used against gun owners.
Before he gets into that, I'd just like to read a couple quick things.
Sure.
The Constitution of the State of Rhode Island, Article 1, Section 22, very simply states, the right to bear arms. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Very simple, very straightforward. In the criminal offenses of the state of Rhode Island, Chapter 11, 47, 41, no government agency of this state or its political subdivisions shall keep or cause to be kept any list or register of privately owned firearms or any list or register of the owner of those firearms. This is the backbone of what we're talking about. Just wanted to give you the framework of what all these bills are trying to get rid of.
Right.
Yes.
I'm glad you did that, Fred, because I think that puts everything into proper context. Because what I'm about to tell you actually should enrage you more than anything else. Let's start with the notion of how many people who legally possess firearms in the United States of America, who use them, who own them legally and use them responsibly. By 2009, there were reported census numbers where that number is 80 million Americans. Wow. Today, many of us actually believe that that number is actually north of 100 million. So really, you're talking about roughly 1/3 of the population of the United States. Now, let's go on down the list. You asked the question, how many firearms actually take lives versus how many firearms will actually save lives on an annualized basis in America? There's been lots of reports that actually as much as 2.5 million cases where firearms in the hands of law-abiding citizens save lives in foil crimes. Okay. The next step down is you ask yourself the question, well, where is all this gun violence? Well, there is. Okay, and it is restricted in the inner cities primarily, according to the FBI and the CDC. And in fact, the DEA also is involved because much of this violence is really caused by criminal drug schemes and drug cartels. And I can get into that in a little bit. That number on an annualized basis today, according to the CDC, okay, Center for Disease Control, which monitors all of these deaths, is 11,000 a year. That's a big number, okay? But when you compare that with 2.5 million people who actually save lives every year, it's dwarfed by comparison. Now, let's go down even further. We all were heartbroken with Sandy Hook. There's no question. I'm a dad, I tell you, I mean, everybody felt pain. Everybody grieved with the parents. There's no question about it. You wouldn't be human if you didn't. But if you look statistically at all of the school killings, okay, the mass killings, there is a nonprofit group that actually monitors this. Actually, this nonprofit group's principal purpose is to study bullying in schools. They recorded that over the course of the last 30 years, the victim count is 297. So, my question for our politicians is this. People are very willing to take a horrific tragedy like Sandy Hook, where 20 children were murdered. We know that, okay? And we grieve for them. But take that, which is a very rare event, to diminish the constitutional rights of 100 million Americans, or 1/3 of the population of the United States. Let me ask you a question. Is that on the face a good public policy?
To me, no, that doesn't make much sense.
Of course not. Well, it gets even worse than that because we know a lot more. Let's take the real problem area, which is the 11,000 murders that occur with firearms every year. The CDC, the FBI, and the United States Department of Justice all confirm that the lion's share of that number actually occurs in areas they call hotspots. That's actually an official term by the FBI, and that describes a densely populated urban environment like Chicago.
Yeah, now Chicago has some of the toughest gun laws in the country and the highest murder rate.
Exactly. Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., New Orleans, Detroit, and those are all hotspots. Now, let's talk about Chicago. Okay, did you know in the FBI and in fact the DEA and the Chicago Crimes Commission recently brought back an old moniker called Public Enemy Number 1? Last time it was used on Al Capone. Today it refers to a Mexican drug lord, guy by the name of Chapo Guzman. FBI and the DEA says Chapo Guzman is single-handedly holding Chicago hostage. Okay, here are the facts. January alone, 44 teens were murdered. And from 2007 to 2012, nearly 300 children of Sandy Hook age were murdered. That means it's 3 Sandy Hooks a year in the city of Chicago alone. So my question is, where is the president on this? Okay, why is the president coming after us, the law-abiding citizens, when we know clearly that's where the problem is? Now, it gets even worse than this. Because the other thing that the United States Department of Justice has unequivocally told us, in fact, they're sounding the alarm bell, that nationwide criminal recidivism is out of control. For example, there was a report from 2003 to 2005 in the city of New York This is Bloomberg country in the 5 boroughs. There were 1,662 murders. The U.S. DOJ says of those murders, 90% were committed by existing felons with a long criminal history. Okay.
So they obviously didn't have legal gun ownership when they committed those murders with guns.
Not at all.
Whether they did or not, it's irrelevant because of the 1,662, not all of them were firearms. Okay. So this is all homicides. So the point is, we don't have a gun violence problem per se. We have a criminal violence problem. And the U.S. DOJ knows exactly where that is. Do you know in the state of Rhode Island, our recidivism problem is 85%?
Wow, no, I did not know that.
Now, in my town, in Portsmouth, in February, a woman was stabbed to death on a RIPTA-bus. Okay, you must have heard that case.
Yes, in fact, we had Carolyn Medeiros on the show and we talked about
Carolyn knows about that very well.
Yes.
I'm friendly with Carolyn. We've talked about it. In fact, you know, obviously we share the same passion in regards to this kind of problem. Christopher James was the murderer. Okay, Christopher James was arrested 20 previous times. Okay, we have a criminal violence problem in the state of Rhode Island. And you know what? It's really restricted to Providence and surrounding areas. It's really not statewide. So we really don't have a gun violence problem. I should talk about that term, gun violence, because I take strong exception to that. That terminology is by design, and I'll tell you why. Okay? I spent 30 years in consumer products. I understand how to reach hearts and minds. I work with some of the best people in the world who understand that as well. People who are brilliant wordsmith people. I'm telling you, gun violence, that terminology, gun safety, that terminology, those are by design. And here's why. When you combine gun and violence, it implicitly suggests that gun is violent. So if you remove gun away from violence, you remove violence. Don't you see?
Right.
See, it's not gun safety. It's really public safety we're talking about. So the notion of combining the word gun with safety implies that guns are inherently unsafe. Okay, so therefore you must get rid of it in order to achieve safety. These are very carefully wordsmith and craft terminologies that basically hijack the discourse, okay, in an unfair way. And I have to tell you, what I found out also, the attacks and the war on legal gun ownership in America didn't just happen since Sandy Hook. It's been in the making for decades. Okay, example. They start out very subtly at first. They say, oh, those toothless rednecks, you know, they cling to their guns and Bibles. Now, who said that, right? Okay, that's vilification. That's demonization of one's character. That's also belittling someone and ridiculing them for being unsophisticated. Okay, those are subtle attacks. Now it's gotten to the point where if you, God forbid, a child draws a gun in school, they can be expelled.
Oh, yeah, if they eat their Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun,
exactly.
they'll be expelled.
Isn't
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
That's absolute madness. But you know what, Leanne? Shame on us for allowing them to get away with it. Okay, let me tell you the consequences of our silence. The consequences of our silence allows them to create an environment where really bad legislation could be passed. Example, Gun-Free School Zone Act, the crowning jewel of the Brady lobby, was passed in 1994. Okay? I would argue that it is complicit in the murders at Sandy Hook. Why? Because the murderer knew that that place is completely defenseless. You see, when the tragedy happened first, I'm a dad. And every day I send my child to school, I'm sending him to a gun-free zone. I do think about that. Trust me. I worry about that because I know the truth. The truth is the only way to take down a bad guy like that is to have a good guy with a gun. There's no ifs and buts about it. Okay? So instead of looking at failed legislation that clearly didn't work, they want more of the same. To me, that's madness. Okay? It's disingenuous. And in fact, it's an agenda. Okay, so what's the definition of insanity according to Einstein?
Is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result.
Thank you. And that's what they want us to do.
Also, taking this a little bit further, our local politicians putting efforts forward for things like gun buybacks. It's very frustrating. They're putting all this effort to make themselves look good and get guns off the street. Criminals aren't going to go to the gun buybacks. They're not going to want the $50 Walmart gift card. You're going to get the guns from my uncle Harry, who just passed, his wife is going to bring him in and turn him in because she didn't know what to do with them. Things like that, they're focused in the wrong directions.
Right. It's not getting the bad guns off the street in any way, shape, or form. I don't know any person who is a criminal who is going to go to a gun buyback and turn their gun in.
Absolutely.
You know what? Fred is completely right. In fact, Fred, you and I have talked about this pretty exhaustively. I'll take it one step further. See, to me, it's beyond just disingenuous. It's in fact dangerous. I call the entire gun control agenda a dangerous distraction. Why? Because A, it doesn't work, so more people are going to die. Okay? B, what's happening is it takes the complete spotlight off of real discourse to find real solutions that will solve our problems. Okay? For instance, what solutions that we actually all intuitively know well. Okay? Mental health, of course, is one, right? And protecting our schools is another one, right?
Right.
Inner city violence, we got to address that. Recidivism, we got to wrap our hands around that thing. It is out of control, okay?
Yes.
And plus, above all, what we need to do is we need to bring hope and prosperity into our state because we all know poverty is tied to violence.
Absolutely.
You know, and then, of course, in that process, preserve the liberties of law-abiding citizens. It seems like a logical formula.
It does. It seems very logical. When we're sitting here talking about it, it seems like we're solving like the entire dilemma right here in this room. And I don't know why nobody's listening. But we do have a caller on the line. Let's get to that call. Hi, caller. Are you ready to take a stand?
Absolutely.
Hi.
Yes, I was calling was about, gentleman was talking about guns and the like.
Yes.
I'm very offended by the attitude of the General Assembly where they're trying to tax the right of gun owners.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to, is that they're not only taxing the rights of gun owners, but they're actually going to turn gun owners into felons the day that law is passed. That's what's amazing about it.
And the tax that they're talking about, they don't know if it's a one-time tax or an annual tax or exactly what it is. They haven't explained what it's actually going to be.
Yeah, so that $100, you could be charged that on a yearly basis or that just a one-time fee. I'm sure once they get a taste of that money, they're going to come back to the table for more.
Leanne, how can they tax a constitutional right?
I don't know. Will it get to the point where it would be a Supreme Court challenge against something like that?
Right. This is actually, these legislators are looking for a lawsuit. But you know what, sir? I think if you're really passionate about it, as we are, show up at the State House tomorrow.
Please, all bodies on board.
Yeah, because you have to be seen, and if you want to testify, come early, because I think the Senate Judiciary hearing is going to be in room 313, and it'll begin at 4:30, so you should show up at least an hour early to get your name on the sign-up sheet.
Well, put it like this. I know how they work up at the State House. In other words, what they're going to do is, especially hot summer days, you can't even breathe in those rooms.
Yeah, and they purposely cram everybody in a small room.
And of course, then they only allow so many people in, and everybody else has to be on the corridor.
Well, here's a little bit of good news, though, and I think to be fair, 313. If you know the real estate up there, 313 is actually a very good room. It's a big room, and also I believe there are going to be closed circuit TVs, so you don't have to be in that room even if you're on the list. And what they'll do is they'll call your name, and you'll have ample time to get up there to speak. So it really, I completely agree with you on some of those other bills. They stuff them in little teeny rooms like closets, and nobody can pack in there, and it's usually too hot in there and everything. But this one, I think, is a little bit different, and I do give them credit for putting it in a very good room.
And please do come visit, because it is going to be all about numbers tomorrow.
Oh, I realize that, but at the same time too, when you look, here we are. Was it mid-April, and all the legislators have basically done is taken up two topics. Gay marriage
and calamari,
and the calamari. Oh yes.
and of course those are such pressing things in this state. While our economy is going down the toilet, you have business owners. They're looking to the state for some sort of help. Instead of a life preserver, they throw them an anchor.
You know, you know what? You're not going to get an argument off of this panel. That's for sure.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's the fact of the matter is that, and how in God's name can the governor of the state say that this is an economic bill, gay marriage?
Well, of course it isn't. Sir, you know what? You should show up. And actually, I don't know if you were aware, but there are some actually in the legislature who are actually trying hard, and they got lambasted by the Valley Breeze recently. I believe Brian Newberry of the Republican caucus made proposals, and in fact had reached out to Colt Firearms, Beretta, and I believe Stag Arms to invite them to come to the state of Rhode Island to set up shop. And he was lambasted for being an idiot, and I don't understand that, because jobs are exactly what we need in the state of Rhode Island. I think it's a terrific idea. Rhode Island is perfect for those light industries,
and we have the highest unemployment rate around.
Right.
So
and we've got some empty mill buildings here in Woonsocket.
The government is our enemy, because we're the worst in the entire country as far as dealing with business.
Well, you know what, sir?
If I had a business, why the hell would I want to come to Rhode Island?
Well,
in all sincerity.
You know what? You're absolutely right, but that's why we have to speak up and change things. I mean, if we sit there and complain, and believe me, I'm just like you. I was sitting at home yelling at the TV, but finally I decided, that's not going to do anything.
And I totally agree with Dex. This was a great state. It still is a great state, but we need to make it better. We need to stop the bleeding and get things headed back on the right direction.
So let me say one thing. I'm a little bit different than you are. I've served in the General Assembly. And the fact is, I may have been a Democrat who later turned to become a Republican. And the fact is that I've never changed my core beliefs.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, because you can be a conservative Democrat up there, but the progressive is basically like the cancer in the whole state.
And you just said something very key to me. This is a subject that is not Democrat or Republican. It's a constitutional right. It should be something that both sides should be working towards a great solution.
And likewise, economic prosperity. I think both sides, all sides, share the need for economic prosperity. I mean, we need jobs in this state. I mean, we don't care about partisanship. It's about Rhode Island.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Here you have on a local level where they had a couple of businesses, a couple of businesses that needed help from the city, and basically they threw them under the bus. They don't want to give them the extra time. They asked for 10 days, and they shut them down until they had their paperwork fixed. Is that the right attitude you want to send to the business community?
You know what? We share your anger, believe me, but that's why we're speaking out, and we encourage you to do likewise and come up and help us, because even as we speak, our colleagues and our friends are in the Newport City Hall, because they're trying to pull a fast one down at Newport City Hall. I mean, I was doing this show, otherwise I'd be there with them. What they're trying to do is pull a resolution and change a resolution that basically supports all these the bad gun bills in the Newport City Hall resolution. So my fellow club members are down there in attendance right now, fighting the good fight. So I encourage you to come up. I mean, and
I'm a member of the NRA, and the fact is that I believe in the constitutional rights.
Absolutely.
And what this federal government as well as state government has done is they've been chipping away for years and years and years.
And we've got to stop it.
And what they want to do is say, we want to keep you more secure. No, they want to keep taking away your rights so you can't defend yourself. And like the other gentleman mentioned about what happened in China, what happened in Germany.
Well, you know what, sir? There's a little bit of good news, okay? When Fred and I first started trying to connect the clubs and link the clubs and going around the state trying to get people really talking to each other about what's happening. Before that, I have to say, in the state of Rhode Island, as far as gun politics is concerned, nobody talks to each other. But that's changed. This year is very, very different. I can promise you that. And so there's some light at the end of the tunnel. And I think people are passionate enough about this issue, regardless of partisan affiliation, regardless of whether you're a union person. I mean, I'm working right alongside with union folks, trying to rally folks in the General Assembly to go after Colt Firearms and invite them to come in, because we could use the jobs. So this is about our state. It's not about partisanship. It's not about petty politics, which has really been killing our state. So we completely agree with you.
And also, if we pass these proposed laws, Colt's going to say, no, thank you. And they're going to go somewhere else, because they are going to go somewhere.
Right.
And I wouldn't blame them.
Yep, neither would I.
They already had one gun manufacturer had relocated out of Connecticut. I'm not sure who it was.
I think Mossberg. Mossberg actually has Yeah, they actually had a manufacturing plant, to my knowledge, down in Texas already. So all they had to do was basically switch off the plant and turn the lights off in Connecticut and move everything down there. So they were already set up. So either they anticipated this or they just had, some of these companies are so big, they're actually multi-state. They're not just in one state alone. So
the problems that we have is as far as our government, is that all they want to do is that they cry about these things at Sandy Hook. Hey, look at all the other gun violence. You look at Columbine. You look at what happened in was it Virginia Tech?
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, you have Chicago, Illinois, with the most constrictive gun laws in the country, and they have the highest murder rate in the country. The fact of the matter is, this whole thing is a fraud, and the fact is that no matter what you say or what you do, it's the progressive agenda is basically to try to disarm America. And I got news for you. Yeah, I cling to my Bible because I'm a born-again Christian, and I cling to my guns because I'm a constitutionalist. And the fact of the matter is that the day somebody tries to take my guns, they walk through the door. Guess what? They're not going to. I'm going to ask one question. You want to meet your maker today? If you do, I'll oblige.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. I mean, come up to the State House. I tell you, I actually think that we have a lot of support up in the State House. We just we need to make sure that these bills do not pass.
Okay. Well, I thank you for the call.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. Have a great evening. We have another caller who's been waiting. Hi, caller. Are you ready to take a stand?
Good.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Hello? Yes, hi, Leanne. Great show. Just extremely informative every point of view. And I have to say, I think Fred and Dexter should be on tour.
Yes, they should. They should be all over the state, bringing this to the road.
They should be all over, and they should be in the print media and on television and other radio. I've never heard such a point-by-point response to all the various kinds of buzz phrases and the way they, as you mentioned, how they kind of phrase the whole thing. They look at it's all lopsided already. It's already related to causally, guns causally causing violence and all that. I thought that was really just outstanding.
Thank you very much.
One thing, you bet. Great job, both of you. One thing this reminds me of is that tragic station house fire. You remember that a number of years back?
Well, of course.
How can you forget that?
Yeah.
Right.
And, the whole thing never would have happened if existing laws and inspection, code, requirements were enforced.
Right.
Exactly.
You're about to hit a major point.
That is absolutely the key.
And then they went crazy. And what happened in this community, there was a wonderful assisted living facility, St. Francis House. That got shut down because of all these retroactive, utility requirements that were imposed that put places out of business. And the thing was such a fraudulent thing because there was this gross, complete criminal negligence in not enforcing the proper inspection code as it was. So that's one thing that was just disgusting.
Yeah, I think
and the same thing that's happening right here.
Yeah, I think your point is spot on. I mean, we were making the point about criminal recidivism being a problem in the state of Rhode Island. I mean, if we enforced the laws and if we really made the laws matter, we really adhere to those penalties, guess what? You're going to reduce crime. But we don't do that.
Yeah, and I think the same thing applies to illegal immigration, too. We're not enforcing those laws either, and we see what's happening by not enforcing the laws that we have.
We're taking the teeth out of what we already have.
Right.
We've had the laws on the books, and they've worked well for a long time.
One quick question, if I could. Fred, you mentioned something very interesting about the right to bear arms as being part of the Constitution. Does that mean there would be some special legislative vote that would be required to overturn that as opposed to just passing a new piece of legislation?
No.
The Constitution is the Constitution. You see, this is what those people do. I hate to say this. I mean, this is not... They've been at this for a long, long time. I'd say the anti-gun people. They know legislatively, I should say, we have a due process. It's called a constitutional amendment. And it's a very, very onerous process. And the reason it's onerous is by design, so that you can't frivolously change our Constitution. Okay? So what do? They try to pick away at it, little piece by little piece, chip away at the blocks, the building blocks, ban this very popular rifle right now, and then ban that magazine. eventually they'll take it all away. And then they put barriers in front of like our permit to carry when, according to the Constitution, they're obligated to shall issue.
They're trying to wear you down to a point where you just say, okay, I give up, and call it a day. It's in black and white, in my opinion, right in front of every Rhode Islander, and it should not change, and we should fight back. If we have to go to court to fight these laws to get them broken and thrown out, so be it. We don't want to go that far. We just want to get these gone before they are even enacted.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, fellas. Appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the call. We have another call. Hi, caller.
Hello?
Are you ready to take a stand?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Hi.
Did you have a question?
My name is Joe McNally. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Dexter and I have been working with Representatives
Hey, Joe.
Newberry. Hello, Dexter. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Okay. We've been working with Representatives Newberry, Coster, and Chippendale to try and bring members of Connecticut's firearms industry here to Rhode Island. One thing that keeps getting overlooked in the Channel 6 stories, the Providence Journal, and the like, is that Connecticut's firearms industry is being driven out of the state by the exact same legislation that is on the table in the State House now. All right. The Connecticut firearms industry employs over 7,000 people, and in 2012 paid $1.7 billion in tax revenue to the state of Connecticut. Now, members of the Rhode Island Second Amendment Commission have already been in contact with members of Connecticut's firearms industry, and they are willing to open negotiations to come to Rhode Island, but they will not come here as long as this legislation is on the table. You see, from their point of view, it makes more sense to move their company 100 miles and leave their entire infrastructure in place than it does to rip it up and move it halfway across the country. Now, we've listened to our politicians for years blathering about development down at Quonset Point and the like. Well, there we have a deep water port, we have a dedicated rail line, we have easy highway access, all the things that these companies need. Now, many of these companies have Defense Department contracts as well. And as we all know, Rhode Island once had a thriving defense industry, and we could again. We could turn this state around and put it back on the road to prosperity. We're not talking about some type of 38 Studios debacle here. We are talking about known, profitable companies with recognizable brand names.
Absolutely.
And these are the type of companies that we need brought here to Rhode Island.
The other thing that, Joe and I have been talking about this. He's very modest. He's done an exhaustive amount of research on this, too.
Don't sell yourself short, Dexter. You've been in on it from the beginning.
He really has. He's worked hard.
We have light industry in Rhode Island that's suffering. We have a tool and die industry. We have a lot of great machinists right here in Rhode Island. Think about the prosperity that will bring to them if we have name brand companies that are right here in our state. It just makes the best sense in the world. I spent 30 years in the industry. In fact, I had a decade-long partnership with a manufacturer. I understand what Joe says about light industry is absolutely correct. Our deep water here for shipping, the rail line, our juxtaposition to New England is absolutely perfect for an industry like Colt Firearms. And Brian Newberry had the right idea. He was unfairly lambasted on Valley Breeze because obviously that fella didn't know what he was talking about.
Well, that guy contradicted himself right in that letter anyway.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of work with Representatives Chippendale and Costa before we even got them to approach Brian Newberry with all of this. And we had made the rounds of all the offices up on Smith Hill. And the only reception that we got was from the state's Republican caucus. The Democratic side of the House was not even interested in talking about the deal until such time as Dexter and I approached members of Rhode Island's Teamster Union, Rhode Island's Labor Union, the AFL-CIO, in order to reach across the aisle to the Democrats and say, hey, this is not an issue of ideology. This is an issue of jobs, period. 7,000 some odd jobs and $1.75 billion in annual tax revenue.
Wouldn't it be nice to get that in our state?
You would think our representatives in Congress would want to draw this into the state of Rhode Island.
You'd think they'd be as excited about that as they were about 38 studios.
Right. Well, another thing that has to be mentioned too is that we already have two manufacturers in this state. Swarovski Crystal makes optics for. They make lenses for Remington Optics, and we have a company called Metal Forms that makes ammunition magazines already.
Yes.
Once this legislation goes through, right, Metal Forms is going to be out of business because that is the only product they make, and the subcontracting for Remington is going to be affected as well. So that is going to cost this state jobs.
Yeah. And there are other hidden gremlins, too, because, Leanne, as you and I talked about off air, some of the things that actually happens in the state of Rhode Island behind the scenes that nobody even knows about is the firearms industry and also purchasing power of the sportsman's community that actually funds conservation in the state of Rhode Island. You know, the DEM actually gets a lot of funding actually from the sportsman's industries in Rhode Island. So if this legislation passes, think about the devastation that does to our ecology in the state of Rhode Island and conservation.
I just know how much it costs my club members to buy ammunition on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. And it's just crazy the money that some people will spend and have to spend looking for this.
So,
because we won't be able to get it here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, I mean, one of the things that we're really working very, very hard is really trying to get people up to the State House tomorrow for the Senate Judiciary hearing. If you don't want to testify, show up anyway and show your support for people who want to kill these bad bills. And again, on May 1st, next Wednesday, for the House Judiciary hearing. Also in room 313 and also beginning around 4:30.
Yeah, and you're having a rally at the State House before that?
I believe we're having one outside for next Wednesday, correct?
Next Wednesday, starting about 2 o'clock. So people should definitely try and get there and definitely join in for that to show your support.
Yeah, pay close attention to this, ladies and gentlemen. This is only our liberty we're talking about.
And we let them take a little, they're going to take a lot more.
Okay. All right, well, Joey, thank you for calling in.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great night. We've got to get to our last commercial break, and then we'll be back just to wrap things up and get a few more points across. Thank you for listening, and thank you for calling in. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, my name is Martha Tater, and I'm calling all seniors. Get out, stay active, socialize, participate in activities you enjoy. Come with friends and make new ones. I've learned firsthand how important it is for senior citizens to become involved. Here are some ways you can enjoy your retirement. Thursdays at 8:30 a.m., come to Boulay Field and play bocce. My husband Leo and I started last year, and we've met a lot of very nice people. Fridays, starting at 8:30 a.m. and throughout the morning, come to Charles Baldelli Field for softball games. If you don't want to join in, enjoy cheering them on from the bleachers or bring your own folding chair. Monday through Friday, come to Senior Center located at 84 Social Street, Woonsocket, open 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Stop in and pick up a schedule for all the activities, including bingo, knitting and crochet, line dancing, cribbage, and much more. A 3-course lunch is served daily at 11:30 a.m. with a requested donation of only $3. The month of May is National Older American Month, and the Senior Center will be featuring special activities and lunches. For more information, please call 766-3734. That's 766-3734. This public service announcement is sponsored by the Woonsocket Republican City Committee.
Please come join the Republican Town Committee for its annual spring fundraiser, Monday, April 29th at Forno's Pizzeria at 2000 Mendon Road, Cumberland, Rhode Island, from 6 to 8 p.m. Tickets will be available at the door, $25 per person. Please come join us. Brendan Doherty is going to be the keynote speaker. Mark Smiley and other people will be there also to talk.
Welcome back to Take a Stand. We only have a few minutes left, but I want you guys to get in those last valid points. I know there's a ton of stuff that we had talked about we hadn't been able to get to. I'm glad we, got to hit a little bit on the financial cost of that, because that was important to me, that there is a financial cost associated with all this, and it is kind of a distraction from some of the other more important things that we should be trying to fix, like our economy. And, my question that I always ask people who are fighting this good fight, and I can never find this statistic. I've looked everywhere online. Out of those 11,000 gun deaths a year.
Yes.
Now, and those are murders. How many of those are committed by legal gun owners? That to me is the crux of the argument.
I actually, you know what? There are reports on that. That's a difficult statistic to completely pin down because it does.
They just don't ask that question when they report these things.
No. There's well, first of all, I encourage anybody who's interested and who cares about the truth to go on CDC.gov or the Center for Disease Control, and also on the FBI websites too, because you can really drill down. And the U.S. DOJ and also the NIJ, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Justice. It's just rich with information. I had to actually work to stitch together the truth, because you get little bits and pieces. I'll give you, for instance, the CDC reports basically a broad data, but what they do is they start drilling down in terms of demographic, because their point of view is really from the Center of Disease Control, less about crimes, more about actually homicides or people who actually die. They only care that somebody died, so for them it's a statistic. The fact that it's a firearm puts it in a certain category, okay? The fact that it's cancer puts it in a yet different category. But I'll tell you, demographically, what's interesting, and it's very sad actually, is that the single largest demographic group of all of those 11,000 that are murdered every year are actually black youths, according to the CDC, 14 to 24.
Wow.
That is a heartbreak.
It is.
That is an outrage. And I'll tell you, and then you can go on the U.S. Department of Justice website, and U.S. Department of Justice actually models incidences and recurrences and causal effects and all these kind of things. And there was at least one model that actually started talking demographically about why the causal effects are what they are, and so they try to model that. And I'll tell you, here's a model that they suggest. If you are born in an out-of-wedlock family, in other words, to a single parent who's not married, you have near 4 times the